What's up, family? Welcome back to the Stop Sinking Show, where we go from struggle to flow. The saddest thing in life is wasted talent. Points if you know what movie this line is from. What's even sadder is that most of us don't even know the talents hidden inside of us. And it's one thing to know your talents and waste them because of lack of effort. It's another to have so many dormant, hidden qualities about you that you don't even know what you're wasting. That to me is even sadder. And so how do you discover your talents? The obvious answer is to try a bunch of different things and figure out which places you're talented. But trying is simply not enough, because trying implies surface level competence, that you just tried. To really discover your inclinations, you have to dive a bit deeper past your initial interest. If you get bored and move on from things after having learned surface level information about it, then it is still highly unlikely that you would have discovered your unique talent within that. You have to learn 400 notes that you can play and then pick the best four. Surface level knowledge does not allow you to know this. You have to learn the rules, play by them for a while, and then you get to your unique styling and voicing that reveals your hidden talents. You learn the rules like a pro and break them like an artist. The saddest part is that many of us don't stick around long enough for the artistry to come out. And I have a theory on why that is, that I have witnessed in myself. A lot of times we only do what is currently demanded of us. We are slaves to the urgent. Urgency is a tyranny that we live in. We only do what is immediately required of us. We fight fires mostly. Most of our energies are spent just trying to keep up with what is screaming out at us for attention. Our daily meetings, emails that must be actioned, our children and families' needs, and our baseline daily levels of upkeep. Many of us don't get to much past this. Some of this may sound familiar to you if you've been exposed to the 4 quadrants of time management by Stephen Covey. In a 4-quadrant matrix, you determine what gets done through 2 characteristics that break out into 4 possibilities. Those 2 are urgent and important. So you have important things that are urgent in quadrant 1. You have important things that are not urgent in quadrant 2. You have urgent things that are not important in quadrant 3. And then you have non-urgent things that are also not important in quadrant 4. Most of us spend our times in quadrant 1, taking care of crisis situations, problems that require solution as soon as possible, and deadlines and follow-ups that must happen. That was quadrant 1. And I'll come back to quadrant 2. Quadrant 3, which is not important but urgent, are things like interruptions by people who call on us for something, frivolous meetings, texts and emails that are just to keep us in the loop. Again, this all fits in the urgent category, but the result is still crisis management, short-term focus, feeling out of control in general. Quadrant 4 activities, which are not important and not urgent, are mostly time wasters, things that you should end up avoiding. And with the advent of social media, streaming on-demand shows, and the limitless distractions in our current generation, this becomes the most obvious waste of time. But because of our addiction to it, this becomes very difficult to avoid, even though we should be trying to get rid of this or minimize this quadrant activities altogether. Now, coming back to quadrant 2, which is where all the magic happens, this is where I am making the argument lies the store of all of your talents. This is where all the planning happens, all the vision comes from, all the discipline and control over your future crisis lies. This is where you lay the saplings before you need the shade from the trees. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. But many of us don't focus here until our current planted trees stop fruiting and are rotten, and we unreasonably look for the result from the next trees that we haven't done the work to nurture. The relationships we didn't build or upkeep, the skills and traits and beliefs we didn't work on developing. All these things that become paramount at a certain point in our life require for us to water and nurture them when they are not screaming at us to do so. It's like laying a softer and softer rock bottom for yourself, or insuring yourself for things when they go wrong, just in case, even though they might never be required to come to the stand. And even though all this preparation doesn't seem urgent at the time because it's not screaming at you, it is not debatable their importance because it puts you in the most balanced position than any of the other activities that you can engage in. And why do we not focus on these parts? Well, the first one I discussed was that our energy is leaking into quadrant 1 and just fighting the most urgent things, we can't seem to get ourselves free from the tyranny of the urgent. But the reason that we do this is because we fail to value time for what it really is. And we think that we can postpone the development of those things at a different time in our life. And I can't tell you how many times I've put off something for myself or have suggested to a friend and gotten the response from myself or from them that goes something like, I just can't do that right now. I'm not in the place of my life where I can focus on this. And therein lies the major flaw in our thinking. We think that we can sequence life. We think that once I get this all sorted out, that I can then focus on that. Let me just get my finances in order. Let me just wait until my kids are grown. Let me just wait until I see success at this current thing that I'm doing. And then I will do those other things that are equally important, but not screaming at me right now to get them done. And I won't see the consequences of not doing those things right now, so I can't be bothered. But again, the problem is when it is time for you to pivot, or time for you to finally focus on your kids once your finances are sorted, and when it's time for you to finally follow your dream once your kids are grown, or when it's time for you to fill in the blank, by the time it's that time, the time is too late. It is by this fallacy of the right path and sequencing that I feel I am not great at any one particular thing. As much as I can make an argument for being a generalist, because I know a lot of things for them to not be a constraint in anything that I'm trying to do, but I'm not particularly great at any one thing. I don't know any one particular thing well enough. The reason I'm not a great guitar player or a great artist or never became amazing at making beats or DJing or simple things like knowledge about pop culture because I never watch movies or shows, all these things that I've dabbled in, all these things I'm not great at because I told myself at a certain point in my life, I'll get back to that. I'll dedicate the time to focus on it. And I joke that I'll sit in the senior home and catch up on all my movies. But I still lose all the lessons I could have applied from those activities being most present in the most active part of my life. Maybe 1 or 2 lines in each movie could have changed my entire perspective, or the stories could have opened up my eyes. By the time I watch them, it will be too late for them to make an impact on me because my life would have already passed me by. By the time I get to my 60s and get to sit in my room and just play my guitar like David Gilmour, I will have already robbed myself of the richness of that experience throughout the most crucial parts of my life. And the things I decided to work on, even though they weren't screaming out at me as it's the best time to do that, like improving my typing ability or my fitness or willingness to sit through hours of content to learn something, those are the things that will add the depth to my character today that I can do something with. And there's really no ever really getting around to it. That's just not how life works. You have to pursue your interests wholeheartedly while they're in front of you. And even a slight bit of interest in something is enough reason to delve deep into it. And sure, you can't be good at everything and you can't focus your time on everything, but you have to ask yourself, what have you really become great at? Chances are, most of those things you got great at, you did when they were not the most urgent thing to do. You picked them and you had trade-offs that you made to spend the time to do those instead of distractions and fighting fires. You did them because you found them important and maybe at that time even felt like a waste of time. But your interest pursued made you more of the person that you are. And all those interests foregone or scheduled to a future date are unlikely to create any major impact in what you get to offer to the world. Everything you're ignoring because you think there will be a better time. more well suited for when you come back to it later in your life. My encouragement would be to recognize that those very things are the things that will make you the person you want to be. You couldn't possibly wake up in your 40s and make up for the compounded time lost towards your fitness and have it add quality of life that you could have benefited from in your 20s and 30s. Nor can you make up for the accumulated benefit you will reap in your 50s and 60s. If you lost the 2 decades of exercise, you're not going to be able to make that up. And you won't wake up in your 50s and 60s when you now might seek and value companionship and love after being more financially settled and now have the benefit of the strong bonds with your children or wife that you never nurtured. All of your hobbies, your interests, your inclinations and tendencies, all of them have a timeline of development and the resulting periods of richness and meaning they add to your well-rounded, diversified life. All these things are important. But if you only live by the tyranny of the urgent, you will never get to them. And then God only knows what you could have been. Love you, family. Stay true always. See you on the next show.